Welcome everyone to our full body meeting of the Redding Consortium. We are here at DSC on the riverfront and we are meeting in a hybrid fashion. Hopefully everyone who's online can hear me because we do have members here in the boardroom with us as well as on Zoom. The purpose of our meeting today is reporting on updates about our redistricting efforts to vote on our spending plan for the fiscal year 2022. And we will also hear some monitoring and implementation updates about our initiatives, which are in monitoring and implementation mode. So there you see it, they're up on the trains. You can see that as well. If anyone's having any trouble seeing or hearing, please pop something, a note in the chat for us. Next slide. So just as a reminder, the norms of our meeting, this is a hybrid meeting. Please announce your name if you can remember that before speaking. And that goes for those of us in the room as well as online. So everyone, if you're online and you're not speaking, please keep yourself muted. We are recording this meeting. We're recording this meeting and it will ultimately be posted for the public. So please stay mindful of that. And for those consortium members who are here online, please type your name into the chat for our roll call. Ellie, are we going to do an in-person roll call? Who's in the room, or are we just going to write down who you see? We need to do it out loud.
I think so. Unless you feel strong.
You feel comfortable in identifying. You have some new people, which I will introduce in just a moment here, and that will serve as your identification of that as well. Just as a reminder, we do have leaders and students from Delaware State University and the Institute for Public Administration from UD as staff members to provide support for us. All of their work in keeping us continuing to exist and function and be a productive body. Big news, we have new members for several roles for a few reasons. There was a change in leadership for the Wilmington Community Advisory Council, which was formerly represented by Kevin Kelly, and I don't see him in here, but Ray Fitzgerald, who's the Executive Director of Wilmington Housing Authority, now President of the Wilmington Community Advisory Council, and will be stepping in for Kevin on the consortium. So hopefully we will see him tonight, virtually or in person. We also have Dr. Lisa Lawson, who has assumed the role of superintendent for the Redding District. You applause, congrats on your role and welcome. We have Dr. Bob, who is interim superintendent of the Christina School District as of how many weeks now? About 4 weeks. So congrats and welcome to on the consortium. And then we have a new parent representative and an educator representative. We have Kendra Brown, who is the president of the Parent Advocacy Council for Education. It's Ron Williams, who is an educator from Coomba Academy and our new educator representative on the Redding Consortium. Welcome. Anything on your own part you would like, or we can just do our minute. Are you sure? Okay. Any of you? Some folks have to be at these meetings. I think you guys are brand new. All right, cool. So now we're going to get into our first order of business. We do have a quorum, I believe. We have our minutes from our last meeting on May 9th. That you should have received via email. You don't have a printout of those. And what we would like to do right now is to entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion. We're raising the volume so it's better for people online.
Oh, okay. Now we're max volume, so we can't do any more. Okay, we had a motion from Matt Dunn to approve our May 9th minutes.
Second.
Third. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Oh boy. Anyone opposed? Say it now. Anyone abstain? Oh, yes, okay, so we did have one abstention. Dr. Lawson was not present for them. I believe that motion carried. So we are going to go ahead and move on. I don't think we have our representative Kocha online with us. So you're gonna continue to have to hear from me. I'm gonna slides, updates. So just to recap, hopefully it's been a few months, summer happened, we're back at school, lots going on. But, you know, just so you, especially those of you who are new, we did approve our interim plan in May to ground us in discussion about the work we have ahead of us. We approved the frameworks. Final plan. On May 9th, we did that. And the key areas of the plan include in any redistricting approach that we put forward, it is recommended in that approved interim plan that the Christina School District be removed from the city of Wilmington. We also approved that this plan will be developed on an 18-month timeline. That time, a couple of stipulations under that were that there would be no immediate student and personnel changes. The final redistricting plan that we have that 18-month timeline to use will require in the Delaware General Assembly and the governor. Also we affirmed in that document the current understanding that any such shifts will not occur for another 3 to 5 years, coming with an appropriate transition implementation period as determined during this adoption. We agreed that we would build a subcommittee structure to create a final redistricting plan, and that would include community engagement subcommittee, fiscal impact subcommittee, and an operational impact. And these committees will be doing the work of ensuring that the final redistricting plan meets 13 stipulations, which are outlined in the Delaware Code that establishes the ultimate proposal has to include information meeting those 13 stipulations. They were all included in the interim document, spelled out as to which subcommittee will be responsible for which of them. Also agreed that we would like to see a landscape analysis completed that would be focused upon the social drivers of health and education for the city of Wilmington and northern Newcastle County. This would examine the broader ecosystem around the implications for the lived conditions impacting students and families before and after. So we know that we've seen analyses really looking at what happens inside the school building. This would be dealing more with what students are experiencing outside and how best for us to, we hope that will inform our ability to best leverage resources and recommendations in light of that. And then the framework for the final redistricting plan may also include more detail on broad policy reforms related to revenue, state investment, charter and school choice reform, and other big ideas. We did not, I'll just add as a note now that we plan set up a subcommittee to work on those big ideas, which are not insignificant. But our expectation at this time, subject to discussion of the consortium, is that Matt and I will lead the work that portion and consult with you as the consortium member. Does that sound right? Would you like to add any flavor to that?
No flavor to add.
And of course, throughout this process, the Redding Consortium will present updates to and collect feedback from the State Board of Education. It's already initiated in spring. Work to ensure open dialogue and to do that directly with impacted communities in building a final plan that is best for students and families in Wilmington and northern Newcastle. And before I move on to talking about the landscape analysis update, I'll just pause if there was anything that was unclear or anyone has any questions about. So over the summer, the leaders of the consortium, Matt and I, and members who really led, I think, in the proposal of landscape analysis, Superintendent Green and Ray Jones Avery, we did continue to do our homework throughout the summer, along with the support of the staff, and convened a series of meetings to discuss vision, goals, and the scope of work for this landscape analysis that we included in the interim plan. So the vision for this includes examining, as I mentioned on the last slide, holistic lived conditions affecting children in the city of Wilmington and northern Newcastle County. And that the study findings will inform vision and strategies for redistricting to improve educational outcomes and support services for city of Wilmington personnel and surrounding neighborhoods. And that these findings will also inform the districting option that needs to start up there and most feasible to improve student outcome, resources to attract and retain school personnel, and infrastructure aligned with stipulations for full Redding redistricting plan. Read it again. No, and of course, you know, as we've stated, the goal of this analysis is to help to inform the work of the 3 Redding subcommittees. With the intention that it'll build momentum to catalyze them throughout the process. Plans. And a little bit more in detail of what we've done in July. We considered and deliberated over 2 different methods for selecting a potential vendor. There were 2 options that we were able to consider. One would be to follow a traditional proposal or RFP route. And the other would be to use state-approved vendors that are provided through the Delaware Education. These vendors would be folks who had previously been approved through a specific RFP process to provide educational services in the state of Delaware. And engaging with these options, we found that the traditional RFP route would take at minimum of 90 days from our process, while selecting approved vendors would shorten the timeline to allow us to begin the landscape analysis contract and sooner. So in terms of timeline, a major implication for this decision is based on the timeline for redistricting work that we set out for ourselves in May, not the deciding factor, but a major consideration. Because we have an 18-month timeline that the consortium voted on in May for the interim plan to work, the projected timeline for the landscape analysis at this point would be the start of a contract period. We believe that a phased consolidated report of the landscape analysis can help inform the consortium's work towards development of its final redistricting plan. And over the course of the contract, a potential vendor that is selected would work with us as consortium members to convene community focus groups to gather data, collect relevant primary and secondary data sources, and share timely report outs on the progress of the landscape analysis with the Redding Consortium in parallel the work that we'd be doing to develop the final redistricting plan. I'm going to take a breath for a moment and see if anyone has any questions. So the conclusion we came to was that ideally the deliverables for the landscape analysis would include the following. 3 phased consolidated reports of relevant data and findings to brief subcommittees and inform their work. And the plan would be to have the vendor share these requested report outs at full body meetings and planned retreats in which we would engage with the stipulations that guide the work of each subcommittee. And that at the end of a 12-month period, a comprehensive report will be issued. This would be a report consolidating all of the previous phase reports as well as final recommendations on the implementation process for how impacted school districts can use the findings for transition. Slides also what I'm saying. Read off there. So we acknowledge that the traditional RFP process could elongate the time to get this process started. Our leadership team and staff chose to review the list of potential vendors from the state approved vendors list and identified 2 organizations from the list that had experience in conducting landscape analysis work. In August, the consortium leadership team had 2 discovery meetings to discuss the project with 2 of those vendors, organizations that have done work with the state of Delaware and are reputable. We've received project proposals from potential companies and are currently considering a range of costs for the budget of the landscape analysis. Are finding that there are comparable costs to complete this one. To kind of hearken to one of our later action steps, there are dedicated funds for supporting redistricting effort in our spending plan that we're going to vote on tonight, including funding to support the landscape analysis. We have been advised that until we have selected a vendor, to avoid getting into all of the details of the who's and the exact costs, but we do plan to share all of the full information from that vendor once we have clearance to move forward. Superintendent Green, Ray Jones Avery, and I have worked on this in collaboration with Redding staff to lead the work with the support of the consortium. We do, of course, want to get consensus and support from the consortium members to empower our team to continue to move this necessary work forward, and that will kind of be an asterisk in our spending plan motion to approve. So that is the overview of the homework that we have done on the landscape analysis. And I believe I've had quite a few conversations with a number of you on it the last several weeks as well. But happy to answer any further questions anyone in the room or online might have at this time. Oh, yes, sir. Mr.
Did you, I wasn't clear whether you were still considering a formal solicitation or just going with the 2 vendors that you said previously did work with the state?
Well, we haven't made any commitment and are not empowered to do so until we voted on the spending plan tonight. You know, I'll sort of look to Ray and Superintendent Green as well, that, you know, if we come to the conclusion that neither of the proposals is adequate, we could do that. But I think that's a big have to do, and it's
I think your question is,
if we still do an RFP.
I thought you were asking, are the vendors that are being considered from the state list?
Kind of. The point, let me make it more direct.
Yeah.
So there's a process in procurement called piggybacking.
Oh.
That if the folks have already had a contract with the state entity, whether here or somewhere else, that you can just piggyback off that contract for a similar service.
Interesting. I've never heard that term.
I mean, we do it as districts when people have existing gone out to RFP to piggyback. I think the question is, that still creates a timeline issue, and then you gotta figure out who has had similar contracts, which is easy to do.
It's usually quicker than the RFP, that's all.
Right, yeah, and that's why we went with the
2 internal.
Right.
who already is on the state approved list.
Right, that's what I was considering internal, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Piggybacking on the fact that they've gone through that RFP process before, but a unique contract just for portion.
Well, I'm just saying, I was just, if the RFP process was still on the table, that could be an option with that group or some other group who has a contract with a state agency.
And consider that. Other questions or? Okay, the other piece of homework, not quite finalized, is next slide, would be this subcommittee. So as I mentioned, we have the 3 subcommittees that we will have: operational impacts, fiscal impacts, and community engagement. We have worked to draft membership based on expressed interests of members, areas of expertise and experience, and creating a balance of community representation across the 3. I think, does the next slide actually have the list on them? Because I don't want to have to, okay. You know what, I may just pass these sheets around. I don't know if I want to read the list. So we have draft lists. I've probably spoken to you about who is likely to be which. One thing that I want to note about just the shape of them is we looked to have every member of the consortium sort of equally spread across the three committees. One, I think, important structural note is that for folks who are LEA leaders, so that would be our superintendents as well as our leaders from charters, would have the ability to designate across the subcommittees and choose one in which they would like to serve, or choose to appoint a designee to all three and if not served directly, and that also applies to TNCA as well. So any questions on that? I'm gonna
Sarah Lockman, it's Tika. Can you hear me?
It's a subwoofer on the Zoom.
Can you hear me?
Would you like me to read the list? I mean,
We just didn't put it in the slides. It wasn't.
sorry, go ahead, Tika. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just asking, could instead of this slide being shared, can the list that you're looking at be shared on the screen so we can see it?
Looking at our technical, share the document page so we can sort of. Probably this one, not the one with the highlights on it. You guys don't want to see our color coding.
Share that document, or is that?
That's not, yeah. Working on that. It was asked in terms of like how are they planning to meet and meeting before the landscape analysis. So what our intention would be is that once we've selected a vendor to conduct the landscape analysis, we would have a meeting of the body and members of the subcommittees with that vendor to discuss some of the questions that they are intending to be asked. We would, of course, like subcommittee to consider the stipulations they're charged with, to engage with the vendor who's conducting the landscape analysis, make sure that questions potentially arising are being considered in the work that they are going to pursue. That would probably be done in more of a retreat format. Again, we are and our team probably 4 to 6 weeks away from scheduling, well, not from scheduling, from being able to conduct that sort of a meeting. It's not immediate. Hope that helped.
Send it around afterwards.
We can definitely send it around afterwards. And again, this is not a finalized list. Bit of work. So you'll have an opportunity to review, and if you have any strong concerns, of course, please let us know. We posted this meeting.
Showing on my screen.
Oh,
So it's showing, so we don't know how to make it show up here, but the Zoom attendees are able to see it.
Oh, now that. All right, so if you're on Zoom, it sounds like you can see it. And if you're in the room, you can't, but we will make sure that everybody look at a copy. Once I get through page 8, I'll just rip it off.
I think what Senator Lockman was saying was these committees aren't gonna be doing anything as committees for more, so if we can send the list around if somebody sees something, that somebody's unhappy with a committee assignment or whatever, there's plenty of time.
There's several spots still in the list where it just says so-and-so's designee. So we'd like to share it with people. But for members, we'll see it even in that format. Okay, so I think the next slide we can move to just sort of sketches out the timeline. Refreshing us on this. Not here. Go to the next slide.
Sorry,
You're good.
trying to be high tech, and we had a whole walkthrough. It went perfectly
Fine.
fine. Oh,
All right, cool. Best laid plans, tech works. So as we mentioned, we have just completed month one. Which was the work plan development discussions around the subcommittee, shape, gender, et cetera. We're now having our full body meeting. Our intentions in October are to do a couple of different things. Representative Pocha is working to set up a community town hall with Wilmington City Council. As one of our early opportunities to engage with impacted communities on the issue of school districting. We would like to start working with around ideas for our community engagement strategy, and that of course dovetails with the landscape analysis vendor work that we just talked about. So meeting, and then we'll begin to discuss how the final report will flow. Have another full body meeting in December, and then they'll be convening in January. We expect to have our first deliverable. And next slide. Just sort of a general sketch out of what you can expect to see in terms of meetings subcommittee when they're expected. 18th month, according to what we voted on, it would be October next year. Having a final redistricting plan ready to send to the State Board of Education. Recommendations to go with it. Any questions? Matt, I'm gonna hand it to you for the budget page, just so I can.
Great. So once a year, we need to spending plan. The year that we're actually in right now, so we get a flat amount appropriated to the Redding Consortium from the state budget, and then we're required by the budget to say how we want to spend it, and then that gets sent back to Controller's Office, the State Budget Office, Joint Finance Committee chairs for their sign off. So folks who have been on the consortium for a while will remember that we spent a fair amount of time doing this last year because it was the first time that we had done it exactly that format before and in this much detail. This year's proposed spending plan, which within the materials that you got for the meeting, is again for folks who went through it last year, pretty straightforward because it's essentially just continuing things that we funded last year or that we proposed funding last year. Almost everything we proposed funding last year was on a 2 or 3 year cycle, and we are 1 year into this cycle. So most of this is just continuing funding that we had already approved last year. So I'll go through it real quickly, and obviously if folks have questions, happy to address them. First item is the pre-K slots, and we've recommended for a few years now that the state fund full day pre-K for children that are attending in the city of Wilmington who are in feeder patterns for high poverty elementary schools, and that funding is $3.7 million per year is what we recommended last year, and those are multi-year contracts with the providers. So this is simply renewing that funding for another year for those providers. Similarly, the outside school time services and school health center services, those were awarded through an RFP process last year for 3-year grants pending state funding. And so this item number 2 is the second year of funding for those 3 schools that were awarded the RFPs last year. The third item is the scholarships that we have funded for multiple years now, and this is continuing and actually expanding the funding for those scholarships. As you probably know, it's a very popular program, and we've had more demand for the scholarships than there are scholarships available. So this is an increase in that funding to try to accommodate more individuals who want to get those essentially professional development scholarships for folks who are teaching in our targeted schools. Number 4 is, and the first 3 are all operating funds. So those are all funds that are in the state operating budget and that we would anticipate continuing in the operating budget in future years. Number 4 is basically a continuation of what is remaining or whole school professional development. We had approved a larger amount last year in carryover one-time funds, and this is to allow for the spending of what is remaining in that account, which is $785,000. And for that spending, as you'll see in here, we've delegated to Tika Hartsock and Karen the authority to recommend a plan to us for actually spending that money. The number 5 is what Senator Lockman just mentioned, which is funding for redistricting planning, and that is $1,598,000. That's all one-time carryover funds. So in other words, that wouldn't be renewed from year to year. Some of that money would be used to pay for the landscape analysis that she just referred to, and then whatever is left of it. I'm not allowed to say what the range of bids on the RFP is.
Could advise not
Okay.
to share that.
We anticipate that there will be money left after that RFP is awarded. And as you'll see in here, what this is approving is that for anything outside of the landscape analysis, that the co-chairs would come back to the consortium and recommend how that be spent. So the consortium would have an opportunity to sign off on anything that money is spent on outside of the landscape analysis. Number 6 is the funding for the racial equity data dashboard, which was one of our very first recommendations in 2021. This is the, I can't remember. It was our, it was in our first set of budget recommendations. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is the this project is still ongoing, and this is essentially leaving the money that was set aside for this project intact because it hasn't been spent yet. Number 7 is the second of 2 years of funding of the middle school and high school boost program. And we had committed to doing that for 2 years, and this is the second of the 2 years, and it's one-time money. And then the last item is operating funds that we've allocated every year to pay for our tax from University of Delaware and Delaware State. So that is that's the proposed spending plan, and as I said, it's there's nothing new in here other than the support for the redistricting planning. The one thing that was in here last year that is not, we had put in $150,000 for the Department of Education to fund oversight of developmental screening in pre-K facilities. And it turns out that they didn't need that money and weren't using it for that purpose. So we thought it was better spent on other items.
Question. Fiscal year said 25. When does that start? Because I mean, if it's the state fiscal year, it starts when?
It's July 1,
So,
last July 1.
so we're okay. All right, good. The other question, like, are we open to exploring other state revenue sources other than like general fund? Because some of the I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back or anything, but if I was still with social services, I would have gave you money for some of this stuff from the TANF budget. And, you know, there's a potential that I don't really think, probably don't need to bother people now because, you know, it's the end of the, you know, it's term. But maybe the incoming governor and the incoming administration might be open to providing some TANF funds because the state has a TANF surplus. Unless they mess something up, they have a TANF surplus. And they could maybe, it can be used for any low income person with a child under 18. So there might be a way to use some of those funds for this purpose, and it doesn't have to be, that's money that the administration manages. It wouldn't be anything that you'd have to go to you guys for. No offense.
I had not personally considered that. I don't know if you had, but I will just say, again, we welcome you and your vast wealth of experience in state government, particularly social services. Thank you. Definitely to our homework list. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Senator Buxton, can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
Oh, great. So I pulled over. I'm in a parking lot right now. All good. So I suspect, based on the fact that I don't have an opponent, I'll be in office next year and likely reassigned to JFC. I have such a great respect for the folks that are running this group that I don't have any opposition to what's being proposed. In fact, I lack the knowledge to challenge it. My request is a continuance of last year's presentation at the Joint Finance Committee, which is to say there's a lot of money that's going out. I trust that the money is going to be managed properly. That's not the concern. What I'm looking for is a return on the investment, a better understanding, which is something I'm sure all of you want, an understanding of where the money is being spent and what is the return on that. Are we seeing results? I know that's the plan, but I just want to reiterate that because it really helps, because I learned in my time in JFC that some folks up north are a little challenged by all this. I'm relying on you folks. I just am making that simple request. So appreciate the time. Hope that makes sense.
Does. Thank you, Senator Buxton. And I think, I can speak for Matt and I both that we are very happy to come before Joint Finance in February again and offer updates on how the work is going. At least.
Thank you.
Okay. So if there are no further questions and discussion, I think we can make a motion. We need a motion from someone. We need a motion to vote to approve the Redding Consortium's fiscal year 25 spending plan as written. And that would include the empowerment of myself, Superintendent Green, and Ray Jones Avery to proceed to move forward with the contract for so would anyone like to make that motion?
So
Proposal as presented.
Between Matt and Superintendent Menzer, we've got a motion and a second. I think we need to call the roll on this one. All right, Haley, roll call us, please.
Ayana Khan. Sarah Stowens for Bettina Riveros.
Voting yes.
Yes as well. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Nick Conselman for Saran Cade.
OMB is a non-voting member on the Redding Consortium. We're ex officio.
Woman Maria Cabrera. Danielle Woods. Yes. Superintendent Green.
Yes.
Senator Eric Buxton.
Yes.
Yes.
Jennifer Tompkins.
Yes.
Sean Sokolowski for Superintendent Jones.
Yes.
Superintendent Johnson. Yes. Vince Waite. Matos. Jim Simmons, well, no, you're ex officio. Matt Den,
yes.
Mayor Mike Krzyzicki. Ray Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Ray Jones Avery,
Yes.
Superintendent Bob A.
Yes.
I very much apologize, I don't know how to say your name yet. Brum, yes. Ron Williams,
Yes.
Eva Hartsock,
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Now that we've got that work done, we do have a couple of updates. And I failed to mention when I was welcoming our new members of the consortium to mention we have another new face working with us, and we are going to hear from her during the initiative updates. But Tika Hartsock has been a new co-chair leading working group for educators in its monitoring and implementation phase, and that is Karen Eller, who's joined us from yes, for to see here. Happy new school year. Yes. and new building year.
Yes, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Okay, so I will hand it over to you and Tika, however you have arranged this, to give us your update.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? I might have to keep asking that. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
I may have to keep asking that because literally my audio goes in and out, so I don't know that you can or cannot hear me unless I ask.
Someone type loud and clear in the chat.
I'm sorry? Ah, okay, thank you. Well, great, thank you again. And I was gonna let Karen introduce herself, although I feel like you might have stole the thunder a little bit before I go over some of the updates.
I just wanted to say I'm excited to be working alongside Tika. We just started working together in this space over the summer. Many of you I served with on the Wilmington Education Advisory Council and the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission before their sunset. So I'm just really excited to be working with her. And I just wanted to thank Matt and Tizzy for giving educators a seat and voice at the table in this work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm happy to have you. Or we're happy to have you. All right, so the first thing in terms of the Redding School Support Scholarships and giving a little update on that, the Delaware Higher Education Office and the Scholarship Committee moved to offering a one-year scholarship window, which is different than our previous years for our educators. We plan to take our course and what they plan to take for the coursework over the year of 24 to 25 versus previously they applied per semester. The application window did open on May 15th and it was open for about 30 days. It closed on June 15th. Emails and flyers were sent to all human resource directors, previous applicants, and eligible Delaware institutions notifying employees of their application window, and then the changes that we were making to the process. The DHEO received a total of 74 applicants. Of those 74, 44 were past awardees, and 33 were new first-time applicants. Awards will be determined and announced once the Redding Consortium's 25 budget is approved and moving forward. Some improvements that we made from previous years after reviewing the process was that providing educators with an award for a full academic year, allowing educators to plan and complete multiple courses over the academic year without having to submit multiple applications. We also allow for individual scholarship awards where they weren't going to exceed $10,000, whereas previously there was not a cap per applicant. This threshold allows us to maximize the number of applicants awarded while also giving award recipients the ability to complete multiple courses towards their degree. In several of the applications, educators expressed their application they expressed their appreciation for the program and noted it would be possible to explore it would not be possible to explore these degrees without the support of the Redding Consortium. Some applicants have also asked if there was a possibility to open it up to other degree programs as well. Going forward, DHEO has shared that it would be most helpful for educators if the yearly funding amount for the Redding Consortium was finalized by mid-August at the latest, so that awardees would be eligible for applications beginning in the fall term. And so I know Karen had a few people reach out to her regarding just that very fact.
So for example, I had a teacher reach out that because the way the budget's approved this time of the year in September, teachers that were planning on hoping to get the scholarship money to start this fall semester. You know, for example, I had one teacher saying that she wasn't going to be able to start because she doesn't know if she's going to get the funding or have the award presented to her. And classes start typically in August. So having it this kind of late in September impacts individuals that want to start for the fall semester. So if there's an opportunity to move that back for next year, it would be really beneficial for our educators. And if you noticed in the budget, the amount for the Reading scholarships doubled this year because of the popularity of the program and the amount of applicants, so.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Is the application process the window only open one time a year?
Yes, it is now. Previously, it was per semester, and so there was multiple windows. But to be able to fund applicants for a whole year and kind of make those projections, they moved to one window process.
I'm just asking because of the folks who may not know that they're going to be assigned to these buildings when the window closes. So that was just my question. So what happens to folks who are working in those buildings who were not placed in those buildings before the window closed? So I was kind of thinking if we could have like rolling applications. I understand why they're doing it so that you could have a year, but I also just wanted us to kind of think about that as well. But that's a question for a different time.
Maybe a later window for those that just began at one of the Reading schools in August.
Yes, please.
I don't know if we can have two separate windows, like a late one later in the summer.
Yep, we can take that back. Thank you.
Be a district employee to qualify for this scholarship?
You mean that like a traditional district versus a charter?
Okay, so do you have to be employed by the state in order to be eligible for the scholarship? But do you have to be employed by the state at one of these rental schools?
Who are you thinking of that perhaps is not an employee of this?
So agency workers. So they're employed by the agency that works for the school, but is not employed by the state. So will they still be eligible for this scholarship?
This time they would not be, but are you suggesting like if there's someone who's currently there working in the capacity as an agency worker who might be interested in making a transition to teaching?
What percent of our employees are agency workers? So it will be a big chance to catch a lot of people who have the potential to be certified teachers, but only can get employed through the agency. And because of their position, not only because of that they can't get in the district, is because of certain positions are only employed by the agency.
I wonder one opportunity that might be helpful for that is if those individuals were interested in early education teaching. I know there are some other programs and scholarships that provide opportunities for those, but beyond people that may work at some of those early ed sites, I'm not sure what other programs may be available.
So we've actually had people from our agencies then move into work at the school to apply for the Reading scholarships. They were actually a part of the school and then they were able to do that. I've also known of some agencies that don't always do everything in the background. So we have dismissed some agencies because there are reasons that sometimes people can apply for agencies, but not to an actual school position, just as a FYI. I would just caution on if that were to be the case, and there'd be something else in place for that. The other question I had, was more so about I think Tika mentioned there was a request to look at other programs. Is that other programs outside of Delaware? What was the request that was made?
No, it was more around adding like people that wanted to get their MBA or things that weren't necessarily associated with education.
I think, obviously this is a retention and recruitment and pipeline growth strategy. So I think we wouldn't want to be necessarily sending folks out of the professions. That's what they're alluding to.
Yes.
Yes.
In the original recommendations, part of the recommendation was to kind of pull people in who weren't necessarily teaching to teach, so it
Yeah.
might be something. Mhm.
Tia and Karen, I appreciate you bringing that feedback because we do want to know what people are saying. They're looking to do. It's helpful, and any recommendations that you might want to bring forth for us to consider for altering the program. Or, of course.
All right, cool. Any other questions for Laura Burgos? That's her hand. Oh, online, Dr. Burgos, good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I just had a few quick questions around the data being gathered around the long-term impact of the scholarship supports. Are recipients required to commit to teaching in one of our schools for X number of years? What has been learned thus far around the impact on retention in our city schools?
So currently, there's not a requirement for that, but it is something that we have discussed. And in terms of the data, I think Lisa, who is our contact for the higher ed department, is still synthesizing some of that. So to your point, those were some questions that we asked, and then going forward, making some other decisions. So we're still waiting to get some of that feedback as well.
Thank you.
Promising, but I know we don't have our full data, right?
Yes.
Saw some numbers that. Yeah, strong.
Some of our scholarship recipients have remained.
Well, I think that also might speak to east side, the culture that you have east side, the fact that there might be opportunity. I think generally speaking, a lot of times stipulation that folks do the commitment. Actually, you see less people apply for like scholarship opportunities because of the uncertainty. I know a lot of the state retention efforts for hard to staff areas, they saw a reduction in the number of folks applying for it because they weren't willing to commit to. And you have to pay it back. A lot of uncertainty in people's lives that now I may have to make a change and I can't, and that's just now listed today. At a P20 meeting today. So reduction.
Oh, wow.
But when they removed that, they actually saw an increase. Trend is that's the point. Once you do have beyond the scholarship opportunity, provide them quality experience and support within that work environment is typically what key.
There's nothing else on that. Thank you, Karen, and welcome. Thank you, Tika. And now we're gonna hand it over to Superintendent Penzer for an update on Boost 26.
So for those who aren't aware in the room, Boost was actually just a conversation between the superintendents that served the city of Wilmington in January of 2020 before the wheels came off the bus about just wanting to do something different for the city, students in the city of Wilmington, looking at that area differently, not as 5 districts, but as a city. So we had several conversations and plans and ideas and concepts. And one of the ones that came out of it was this notion of a community graduation coach. That there were individuals who worked with students that were supported by the district, but they worked with any student who lived in the city of Wilmington, period. Didn't matter. If I had a person that worked in Colonial and they were working with a family in Red Clay, so be it. It was looking at the city as a whole. One of the vendors that we had identified during that process was communities and schools. They were the ones who were most flexible and nimble enough to build a position and meet the guides of their pillars for their national organization, as well as have the flexibility of data to do this position. So we did it for year 1. We did it in 23, or a freshman class came in 23, I believe it was, and the districts funded it. Last year, it became apparent that there was some out of school time money on the table from Redding. And so Redding, we brought forward the proposal to this group, and the Redding group agreed to fund those positions for 2 years Matt just got the third year. So it's this last year and then their junior year, which they're in right now. So we're still gonna be working on the fourth year later, but we got them for the junior year now. And one of the things that we've also done is we've taken this data, and it's a huge data set because we have data sharing agreements with all the districts involved to share the data around this project. And the IPA and myself have been working on what this data looks like, comparing them to the previous year's cohort, because that's one thing that we learned early on in the process is we did a project, but we didn't have a baseline data to compare it against. So when we did this data sharing agreement, we actually had a data sharing agreement for the class of 2025 as well, who's not getting the treatment from the graduation coaches. So we can see, are we making a difference to apples? So IPA and myself and communities and schools and data service center over the last several months have been grappling with this data set, to say it kindly. And we're getting there. We're getting to the point where we might actually have an analysis to share. We got a little bit ahead of ourselves. We were hoping to use the same data and actually create a more of a real-time data dashboard in DSC so that the coaches in the schools could see the students real time and make some decisions instead of having to wait for static reports. Because the geotagging that we also got as the equity dashboard was beneficial in this space. So we could see students who live in the city of Wilmington, didn't matter where they went to school. There's been a little bit of a ripple in that avenue because Infinite Campus is now in play and districts who use Infinite Campus don't use Data Service Center. So the data no longer will, so in Newcastle County VOTEC, their data in this project is no longer available to the project because they don't talk, because Infinite Campus doesn't do geotagging and there's still a lot of work going on in Infinite Campus. So we've had to pause the real-time dashboard use piece. We have a great data set to look at for last year to kind of zero in on to see what things can we learn from last year's data.
Just for public consumption, those who, because we speak in acronyms and names, it's the student information system. So it's the old e-school system where student information is kind of housed in many of our charters and several of our school districts across the state, for the state transitioning to a new student information system. Used to be e-school, now it's Infinite Campus. Those wave ones districts and schools who are on Infinite Campus, it doesn't line up. So even something as simple, well, not simple, but something as complex as transportation. So transportation systems no longer really line up with, and there's a lot of fixes that are going on behind the scenes. So for this project, to Dr. Menzel's point, VOTEC is a wave one district. So their data no longer aligns to with the rest of the boost districts in terms of how we were looking at that.
So the one thing that we do have is, fortunately, we do have the old pen and paper still works.
Yeah.
Communities and schools, they went out, they were providing the reports in pen and paper because they're the boots on the ground folks. These are 4 individuals who work for CIS, communities and schools that are in schools where students who reside in the city will attend. And so I do have 2 reports to share with the group. One is the mid-year report from last year that I don't know if we've met enough for me to get an opportunity to share it, but I've had it. So I will pass it around or share it in copies. I'm sorry I didn't have it in advance because I literally just got the end of year report Sunday because summer school wrapped up in August. Boots on the ground, CIS, new leadership at CIS, 2 new community graduation coaches getting onboarded, replacing 2 other ones. So they've been in a little bit of transition. So I literally just got the end of year analysis. So I'll pass to the right, the mid-year report. You'll see as you look at the mid-year report, in January of last year, 69% of the students were on track to be promoted. This is of a cohort of about 540 students. At the end of the school year, there were 532 students in the cohort, and 89% made it to the next, so they made it to the 11th grade. So these are the first group was 9th grade, last year was 10th grade. So we have 89% who total made it to the 11th grade. And you can see by school, the different numbers of the kids that they're working with and the percentage in each school. And they're clustered not by any rhyme nor reason, other than they're clustered by the coach. So you'll see the group at the top is one coach, and then the next coach, the next coach, and the next coach. So there's 4 clusters here. And so these are individuals who are in all these schools all year long. And on the back of the mid-year report, you can see exactly where the kind of like what the work is they're doing. It's on the back, it's coming around. The mid-year is making its way around.
For the mid-year.
So, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. There's no,
Emails.
and I'll make sure I forward it. There's no good or bad, like, there's no, put your numbers low, it doesn't mean you're bad or you did this. This is just numbers to show that the group, they are making a difference. And and I checked with IPA today, and statistically, we do see there is a difference with this cohort and the non-treatment cohort. There's enough that Ashley today said there's statistical difference that the treatment is having an impact to a positive effect.
And again, just because we're educators and we typically know, so when we talk about the idea of retention, just for those who, promotion in high school is about credits. And credit bearing. So if that student, 9th grade, isn't on track to graduate because they haven't acquired the number of credits, then they're still listed as a 9th grader. Now they could pick up that credit and accelerate that to get back on track. So I think generally speaking, we tend to think of Delaware as a 180-day school year. It's not the case. It's a matter of seat time. And when we talk about grades, being retained, 9th grade, 10th, it's about earning credits. So when we talk about retention, just know that that student did earn a specific number of credits to kind of move to the next grade.
You'll see on the back of the mid-year report, the comment is in the middle of their 10th grade year, the comment was they're still behind on their 9th grade credits. So like, just to give you an idea how fluid it is, that they're trying to catch them up on their credits to that point.
I would also add that to Darrell's point, it's not just number of credits, it's also specific credit.
Specific
So if
credit.
you don't pass English and math because you need 4 years of those, then you won't be on track to graduate until you make up.
There's the state required credits, and then each district might have an additional credit in there that they add, so they have that ability as well.
Which adds to one of the things we talk about in last, right? One of those things to highlight, each of our district has a different number of credits to graduate, right? There's the standardized state credit, to their point, that certain subjects at certain years, grade levels, you have to have, and if not, like, you don't have that math credit, like, grade, you're not a 10th grader.
What is middle school? Have you looked at middle school data?
So we are been playing around with middle school, we were playing around with 8th grade middle school. Last year, we had a data sharing agreement where we were having middle school conversations where we pulled the data set to kind of track the middle schools across all of our middle school students in all of our schools. But we just began that conversation because that is a infinitely larger number of bodies and a lot, to Dr. Green's point, there's a lot more variables in programming and structure when it comes to middle school. You have junior high, middle school, you have different grading configurations that also have an impact. So yes.
I was thinking about the preparation for high school and our students to go into high school.
That's where we were looking at 8th grade. So we were thinking the same thing. We're just trying to get, our middle school conversation last year became focused on engagement with the student so that the student and the family bought into the school environment, that education is an option that's of value so that they're more likely to stay in school, therefore also go to high school instead and get on track. So we were looking at it from a different lens than just pure academic conversation.
And knowing that your 9th grade year is your most important year of high school.
Yeah.
Right, because you that on track to graduate. So if my GPA, my first marking period, first quarter of high school, but also knowing the prerequisites, right? If I'm not strong in foundational algebra 1, knowing that the chances or likelihood that I'm gonna go on to take advanced placement math, I'm already starting at a deficit. So we did try to look at 8th grade to a degree, to look at preparation, to look at foundation, ensuring that on track to graduate with your 9th grade cohort is a telltale sign. You know, those students who fall behind tend to stay behind.
Are we only looking at student, or are we looking at the whole entire house?
Well, that's what we said, trying to figure out what.
That's
those
what we
vendors-
started a mini landscape analysis last spring where we had New Moors and City of Wilmington Parks and Recs. We had the districts. We had we have the CEB building involved. So Linda Jennings and some of the charters, trying to get an understanding of the community needs and the things that are going on in the home to try to do the best we can. But we're still, again, those are conversations that are ongoing, but they are part of the conversation.
Housing, seeing.
Housing, yep.
I'm just about, I guess, let's be honest about how we can pass you if we don't have the right credits that you need. We still just pass you anyway.
Technically, you're not, I think that's the thing, you still have, so in essence, the way it works is you're basically end up being a fourth, fifth year or 6-year graduate.
Thinking of it as years in school, not so much a grade at that point.
I totally get it, because I was one of them. I totally get it, but for me, I think was if someone would have had stopped me in 9th grade to let me know that, then maybe I might have would have made other choices other than thinking I got to 12th grade to get it together. When you don't. I think a lot of us think we have it into 12th grade to get it together, and you don't.
That's a lesson we learned actually in Boost 22, which was we focused for 1 year on anybody in the class of the 2022 year. And we just went after them, and it was like, they're not interested. So we said, we're gonna start with 9th grade. So 23, these students in this cohort, they've been working with them since 9th grade year.
But
So
what I'm saying is in the 11th grade, if we didn't allow me to be 11th and the 12th grader, if I had to take responsibility in the 11th grade, then maybe I would have had. Maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, like not be
Yeah,
socially promoted.
Right, not be socially promoted to the 12th grade. You're not in the 12th grade, so let's not give you false assumptions that you're in the 12th grade, because you're still in the.
I'm gonna speak to, this is where each district or each high school sometimes handles it differently. It's something that we see regularly. For example, in Colonial, you don't get the grade until you're that credit and you're an R, 11R, until you get to 12. And if it's in January, then you'll be a 12th grader in January, and that's when you get access.
Right.
So like, but not logistically and scheduling wise, when you have a lot of different variables, it's not as easy to do in terms of tracking and monitoring for different programs. So we continue to, there are boots on the ground. There's 4 graduation coaches working with 532 students.
That was one of my questions I was gonna ask you, like the student to staff ratio is probably really challenging to manage.
Yep.
And have you all thought about maybe trying to expand the amount?
Well, we did. We went from 3 to 4.
Okay.
We added a 4th.
Right.
And they also work, I know within our district, they also work with our school counselors, they work with staff within the building. So a lot of them might just be monitoring because that student works, right? And that's what we found out through a lot of the students, because they just need someone to help them with an application deadline. So those graduation coaches or
someone to get them up in the morning.
Get them up in the morning. So it's interesting, the scope of what they're doing, but in terms of direct case management, a lot of that too, I know. Supports, but it's that person that's not allowing them, almost like a care coordination. That person who's not allowing them to kind of fall through the cracks. I also help remind that school counselor that, hey, Darrell needs X. And is there someone in the building who can follow up on it? It just might be that simple ask that's not allowing them.
And communities and schools will speak up if the numbers on this load are too much.
But that's not to say that we don't need more. Yes.
So like we're threading it's a balancing act, but we are continuing to look at it and grow and Darrell's point, each of the, one of the things that we're gonna try to do for the boots on the ground folks a little better this year is we have a list of all their contact people at each of these schools, and they're new. There's new faces everywhere, and when new faces come in, it takes a while to build that relationship back up. So that's something that we're finding. We're gonna try to zero in on who those point of contacts are, making sure that that we're not missing a beat because we have a bunch of new faces who are trying to work with students. Because everybody's on the same page and on the same path. It's just coordinated across multiple districts and charter schools, as you can see, because early college is on there. And there were some there were some other charters on here in the early phases, but they didn't stick. Prairie and they didn't. So had to kind of move on. So that's the update I can give you right now on.
Question?
Can I make a statement, more of a comment than anything else? This is Senator Buxton.
Yes.
Hi, and all due respect, and this is more speaking for districts down here, down my neck of the woods, downstate. One of the things that I've cautioned the schools about in my 30 years as an educator, in my experience of the use of credit recovery that started out basically with children dealing with disabilities that have kept them out of school for a long time, that has now become almost a replacement for class time and an earning of a credit, for the simple reason that we want to keep kids on pace. And I think what it's doing, I know what it's doing. It's a disservice to many of the kids who don't belong in that space. It's a disservice for the kids who really need that space. I'm not speaking to the ones up north, your group. I don't want to confuse the two, because I do believe you have a better understanding. But I know for a fact down here, downstate, we are misappropriating and overutilizing credit recovery for students that should be held accountable and be forced to actually learn it. I'll just make that as a comment. So I don't know how you cure it, but I need to keep saying it. Thanks.
No one else has any comment or question?
My comment is congratulations. I understand it's a pilot. You're in year 2, 3.
This is 3, junior year.
It takes a while, but it's showing promising results, and I think it's worthy of celebrating. I want to be the one that rides through the community with a speakerphone in a state-sponsored car, telling everybody to get up and go to school. Because they have to be out in the wintertime, they have to be out on the street corner, it's still dark outside.
I agree. I can't believe you.
So it's you gotta really be motivated.
Speakerphone for you, nephew.
State-sponsored car and a big.
Somebody have to get me up.
But no, I was gonna say something similar, and I heard you say thank you, Erin, and I feel the same way. I know we spoke about sort of shuffling priorities. I don't know how many years ago it was, and wanted to spend as much time talking about secondary equity as we were on early childhood, and I think that you've really delivered. So thank you. Teron, did you want to say?
No, I just want to share that I think there are more ways to hold students accountable than saying that credit recovery isn't the thing. Credit recovery, and I'll bring, like I was just sharing, I'll bring data just to show that there's a benefit to credit recovery and to families and to students who, for whatever reason, have to take an alternative route to get to where they have to get to, and credit recovery has been a help or a space for them. But I think there are more ways to hold students accountable than to say that credit recovery is a thing that we should kind of take away. Yeah. I just don't agree with that.
Thank you for putting that on the record, and we'll make sure you and Senator Buxton can get an audience. But so thank you all for that. I believe we are now at public comment. So we ask that public commenters commit to 3 minutes, state your name and or organizational affiliation before speaking. So I know we have one in the room, and if you're online, if you'd like to raise your hand or say comment.
Almost got away without saying.
Why don't you stand up so we can see you and hear you?
Bill Doolittle, volunteer African children at risk. I did want to say, well, I appreciate the data system you're using. It really needs to be updated to more modern standards. It's on track to graduate, which really should be the standard, not promoted. Because students with disabilities may have an IEP that has a plan for them to graduate in 5 years or 6 years. And while that used to only happen as disability segregated schools, it's now moving commonly into the inclusion school. So just keep that in mind when you're working your data.
I'll take that back to communities and schools, thank you, Bill, and talk to them about modifying their reporting process. Yeah, thank you.
we have anyone online? Okay, I'm gonna let you handle that.
Yep, we have two folks online. Marco Alberti was first and then Jenny Howard.
Great. Awesome. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I actually am not by myself. I have somebody named Marcus Brown who is with me. He is also online, so he's probably going to wave and say hi. We're here as members from Wilmington University, actually. First, I want to thank everybody at Redding for the continued support that they have had on so many people with their education, especially in Wilmington. I know plenty of people on my own staff, and yes, I said staff, who have taken advantage of it. One of the things that came up during the meeting tonight was actually the expansion possibly of offering it to other degree programs. One of the things that we want to present to the Redding Consortium is that in the past, doctoral work was actually eligible. In this case, it's something that we want to actually implore to consider in the future. And the reason is not only because of the financial burden, but there's so many different things that you just named in this meeting alone that from even doubling the capacity of how much is offered in the scholarship fund on its own, I just want to name that there's so many amazing people that want to dedicate so much of our time and resources to Wilmington and the future. It's really difficult to do it with the financial burden that comes with graduate school, especially at the doctorate level. And while this isn't necessarily the most important thing, but even as an assistant principal, I know of teachers that make significantly more than me. That's not the reason to give someone the scholarship or open it up to people in a similar position as myself or Marcus or anybody else. But there's also so many other individuals like counselors and other programs and other positions that are also in Wilmington schools who are looking to do this and feel that it's a barrier because they don't have the resources and it's very difficult for them to do it without that opportunity. So I hope that that is something that in the future you do consider, and I would absolutely love to talk to others if they have other questions about it. And Marcus, if you want to answer or add anything to that, I'd love it. He's also at back to school night, so sorry about that.
Hi, this is Tika. I just wanted to speak to that for a second. So we actually have had conversations, and actually in the past there were doctoral students that were included in the scholarship. But when we looked at the number of applicants and the funds and the ability to retain and recruit educators and really kind of expand those numbers, we prioritize getting, whether it's pairs or like you said, other people in the building that were looking to cross over and become a classroom teacher. We sort of prioritize those individuals that were either looking for a bachelor's or a master's. But the hope is that we would also come back and add doctoral students again. But right now, those were the students that we prioritized.
Thank you. I believe we have one Howard's next, and if I know there was one other person, but I don't know if he raised his hand.
Hi, is it my turn? Oh, hi. Thanks for letting me speak tonight. My name's Jenny Howard. I'm a parent, and I first want to say that I know this is not anyone's fault or possibly what the intention was for it to happen this way, but a lot of things that we're still seeing here in 2024 are the direct results of court orders. And I'm really glad we're starting to talk about middle and high school, however, because that's what I'm here to talk about today. So I know you guys are mostly working on the elementary schools and the city schools, but we really need to take a look at the secondary schools. Because if we don't figure this out now, we're gonna run into the same problem and it's just gonna be a Band-Aid. So we need to increase educational opportunity and equity for all of our students. And this starts with bringing back high school to the city of Wilmington and choice busing for students who would otherwise attend a neighborhood school that might be underperforming. And if they want to get out, they would have a way. But right now, when we don't have choice busing, they can't get out. I wanted to bring something to your attention that's been overlooked for many years. Parents, families, and communities want neighborhood schools. We want our kids to be able to go to schools close to their homes. And for that to happen, all of our schools need to be equal. And by equal, I mean the same programs, the same level of teachers, the same facilities, same curriculum, same class sizes across the board. Right now, I worry that when Red Clay, and again, this is not Dr. Green's fault, this is an inherited problem, but I worry that if they get all of Christina's kids, for secondary, we're just gonna have this same problem of inequity again. So right now we have a system set up, it's a competition to get into middle and high school in Red Clay. And the reason is because the kids all want to go to the schools that have the best programs. And these two schools, well, four really, but two of them are magnet schools, the Conrad and CAB. And then the two charters that Red Clay authorizes, Charter School of Bloomington and DMA. Even with reaching out to our city elementary schools and telling them about their choices, they don't really have a choice because they're not prepared, like the suburban students are prepared to get into these elite schools. One example is we have a permanent tag teacher in suburban schools. Tag is talented and gifted. And then in our elementary schools in the city, we have split teachers. So they get less talented and gifted instruction. That's not equal and that's not equitable. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. And the other thing is, our state is footing the bill for CAB and Conrad students to be bused all over the city or all over Red Clay School District. So kids coming from Hockessin, Pike Creek are being bused in to CAB and Conrad. And that is all of us taxpayers paying for that, where we have other kids who cannot get a bus for choice schools because they didn't get accepted or chosen for the magnet schools. So this is a big problem that I really hope that we can take a look at and we can start to undo some of these inherent inequities. I had a lot more to say, but I feel like I'm going to be talking all night about this because I'm really worried about the lack of opportunity for our city students right now when it comes to their secondary education. So please, please, please look at this and look at the opportunities that our kids are given in the city schools compared to those that are given in the suburban schools. Thank you.
Anyone else? I think that is it for tonight. Thank you all. Again, welcome to our new members. I'm always really proud of this you and presentation tonight to confirm that. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, everyone in favor?
Favor,
All
aye.
right, there we go. Bye. Take food. There's extra food. Feed yourself.
I'm gonna